What up, y'all? Illegit back in the house, bringing to you a new poker video. Going to go through some ICM calculations. This might be boring if you um, are a very good poker player yourself and know about all this stuff, but I don't think very much of my audience is, and I think it might be interesting to some of you guys who are curious about poker strategy. And this is really kind of in one way basic, because it's very simple math, but it's also very vital to tournament poker, especially, and illustrates some concepts that most people are completely unaware of, and even some people who know a little bit poker are unaware of. So anyways, I thought it'd be interesting because I just tagged a bunch of hands, and there was a lot of very interesting and very close spots, which are kind of rare sometimes. And every hand I tagged was actually a pretty close spot, except for one, this first one, which was just a massive blunder by me. So that'll be fun. Let's see me make a big error. But it's a very illustrative error of the concept of ICM. So ICM is independent chip modeling, and it's basically a concept that has to do with the difference between cash games and tournaments in a way. So like in a tournament, in a cash game, say this hand that we're about to show is played in a cash game, the answers for what the right play would be is different, because in this hand, in this tournament payout structure, which is just a single person tournament, 6 players at the table, top 2 get paid, first gets 4 times the buy-in, second gets double the buy-in. Essentially, that's the payout structure. Whereas in a cash game, if you every chip is every dollar of a chip is worth $1. In this, there's a payout structure where everyone gets 0 except for second and first. And so what that does to the strategy in terms of the hands is, like, hands that you would play one way in a cash game, you should play differently in the tournament because of that of the payout structure. So you'll get the idea of it as we start to go through the hands, I think. So let's go through this first one. So the situation is this guy's actually sitting out, which means he's not playing, and he's blinded down to essentially no chips in this hand. So we're about to see. Let me bring up the replayer here so I can see where we are. Okay. So we're about to see what happens in this situation. So he's all in the big blind automatically. The big blind is the blinds are 60-120, but he only has 24 left, so the pot's smaller than normal. That also, I think, might come into play in terms of why I make such a big error here. Let me unlock this, and so we can see. Oh, actually, you guys can see it fine. I'm talking about my own stats. Okay, so now as you can see, and basically ICM, very relevant when you're on the bubble, which effectively we are on the bubble, because this guy's essentially out. He's not sitting in. He's not going to be able to play. He's either going out this hand or next hand or the hand after. He's going to be out. He's effectively out. So basically there's essentially 3 of us left. In reality, and only the top 2 get paid. So we're right on the bubble, and in that situation, the stack distributions, who's first, who's second, and who's third, and by how much, is a very critical issue. And also, whether you're calling or shove or you're the one shoving is very critical. So Connors here goes all in. He should be doing this with a wide range of hands, which we'll see in 1 second once we do the calculations. Even though this guy's automatically all in, he should still be doing this with quite a wide range of hands, probably 35 to 45% in that range somewhere, because the stacks are so shallow. So he goes all in with what can be a large range of hands. So and then Sean Miller folds, and it comes to me. So first thing to notice is if we were, because the blinds are 60-120, so I only have 6.5 big. I don't even know what it is, 6 big blinds, something like that. In a cash game, there are no cash games where you are played this shallow. But if this were a cash game, this would be a snap instant. Very happy call, because King Queen suited is so far ahead of his range when he's shoving, what we assume is 35 to 40% of hands. King Queen suited is destroying that range of hands, and so this would normally be a huge call, and a profitable call. But because of what we were talking about, the payout structure, only the top 2 getting paid, and in this case I'm in second place with more than this guy, and this guy's in first place. In this situation specifically, I'm supposed to call very tight here. a surprisingly narrow range of hands, despite how well my hand is doing against this guy's range in terms of chip EV, in terms of the number of chips that I'll make long run. Because basically, the amount of times that I win and double my stack doesn't make up for the amount of times that I call and lose here, like it does in a cash game. In a cash game, you can just do it, and if you're ahead of his range, you'll be making money. But in this case, because of the tournament payout structure, I won't win enough. The amount of times I lose is too often, even against his wide range, to make calling here correct. And we'll see in the calculations in 1 second. So I call. Big blind is like already all in. And the board comes out like this. We can look at their cards now. Okay, and this guy shoved ace-6 off. He's supposed to do that. And I called this. Okay, so now we can go to the calculations and see whether, and I was out on the bubble. And I mean, you don't go by results, but we go by, whether the correct answer mathematically is correct. And they have tools that you can actually figure this out. What is the actual right answer. And so this is one of them. This is called HoldEm Resources Calculator. We can just punch the hand in here, and I gave this guy about this range. When you first do the calculation, it comes in with the optimal ranges for everyone, what everyone should do in a game theoretical setting, meaning like if everyone's playing perfectly, this guy should go all in with this range of hands, this guy should call with this range of hands, and this guy should call with this range of hands. Now you can't just take that on face value, because in game situations people don't do game theoretical things all the time, so you have to take into account what people actually do, and you can mess with the ranges accordingly. I still left it a close to 40%, just because I do so. Did that pop up? Actually, I don't think it's going to. But basically, this range of hands that you see here for this guy, I left it pretty much not too much. I took out like this queen 3 suited, this queen 4 suited, which are profitable hands, just because I think he wouldn't shove some of those. But most of these, it's reasonable that he would shove them, so I left the range mostly the same. Okay, so now the question is, what do I, as the small blind, call all in? And as we can see here, this is what I'm supposed to call. Look out, like, it's an extremely tight range. Just ace jack suited plus and ace queen off plus and nines plus. That's how tight I have to call in this spot, which is really crazy when you think about it. I'm supposed to fold eights. Eights are like a monster hand there. Same thing with king queen suited. It's a pretty strong hand against his range, but I need to fold it in this spot, which is crazy. And we can fiddle with his range. Like you can't see it, but I'm fiddling with it right now. And I'll take out some of the worse hands, like some of more of those low suited queens. Which he might not shove, even though he's kind of supposed to, all things considered, and maybe some of the worst offsuit queens. No, I think that's reasonable. Okay, so now it went down. Now we can adjust and see what am I, if I assume he's not shoving queen 6 suited, queen 5 suited, queen 4 suited, and a couple other hands. Now how does it change my range? Best response. In this case, it doesn't change it at all. Like the range I'm supposed to call is still the same. Okay, so I made a huge blunder in that hand. I was thinking the stacks were super shallow, and I was thinking, okay, we're still four-handed, but we really were not four-handed. That guy was sitting out and also had 0 chips. So that was a mistake by me, thinking that he was still in when effectively and in reality he was not. Okay, so now let's go to the next hand, which we'll see over here. This was not supposed to be. Okay, I forgot to change this back. Okay, so spoilers ahead. So in this hand, the question is, I forget why. Okay, yeah. So everyone behind me is very short, as you can see. This guy has, 20-40 big blinds. 20-40 are the blinds. This guy has 13. This guy has, this guy has 9, this guy has 10, this guy has 12. So they're all shallow, but there's no ante. So when it folds to me here, 10-8 suited, when I first thought about it, I was like, wow, that's pretty close. I think I'm jamming definitely Jack 10 suited here. I'm probably jamming 10-9 suited. It's kind of close. When there's when everyone had the biggest stack behind you only has 13 big blinds, mostly you're just going to be folding or jamming. At least that's what I think the best play is a lot of the time. Better than like raise folding, although you do want maybe a few raise folds in your range depending on how you're constructing your range. I tend to be more push fold when the stacks are like this, but so then you just have to like know the answer whether this is a shove or not. And in game, I thought it was kind of close, but I thought it was definitely a fold. But I thought it was close, so I like just marked the hand so we could review it, and which is what I did. So now we're gonna try to see whether it was or not. So I ended up folding. This guy shoves, and that was the result. This guy, which is like whatever, that's irrelevant pretty much, the result. But now, so let's go look at the calculation. I need to remember which hand this was though, because I've just put a bunch of them. It wasn't that one. No, that was the 3 betting hand. Yeah. I forget which hands these were. Sorry, let me just find it real quick. So what position was I in there? Oh yeah, it was at 2040. Sorry. Cut off. How much did I have in that hand? 1 second. Let me just go back here real quick. 1 sec. Forgive me. I had 727 or so. Minus antes. Oh no, there were no antes, so I had 727 exactly. Okay, so 727. No. These are not in order, obviously. No. 7. Maybe the last one. 727. Okay, here it is. Sorry. All right. So now in this hand. So the question is, what does middle position? That's me shove, okay, and that's and game theoretically, this is the range of hands I'm supposed to shove here. All of the greens that you see here. So basically, as you can see, 10-9 suited is barely a shove. It's plus EV by 0.03, so it's exactly borderline. And so like my intuition was pretty much right on. 10-8 suited is not a fold, barely, by negative. It's a minus 0.08% or 0.08 big blind long run shove, while this one is plus 0.03 or dollars. I forget what it is. But that's assuming that these players all call these ranges behind me, and these ranges might be slightly too tight for what people are actually calling. So even though game theoretically 10-8 suited is very close, in reality, let's say, like this guy always calls eights, which is reasonable. He might, and then let's say like half the time he calls ace jack off. So that like we'll just make that one change. Best response, 10-8 suited gets a little worse, and 10-9 suited becomes essentially break even rather than slightly winning. And that's just one guy. So that same thing would happen if I add sevens into this guy's range, and then over here add like sixes and king queen suited and ace 10 suited into this guy's range, which is also possible that they are calling that wide. Best response. Okay, so now it means that I have to shove tighter when when in-game reality is that people are calling slightly wider than what is game theoretically optimal. Then you have to shove slightly tighter. That's the concept that displays there. All right, so now we will go to the next hand. 1 second, let me bring it up. All right. Okay, so I have a 7 off in this hand. Oh no, this is not it. All right, next hand. That hand I marked, but it ended up not being as interesting as I thought it might be. So, okay, but this one's more interesting. Okay, so here, Thrash and I are first and second. So even though we're 5-handed and we're not close to the bubble yet, bubble is when there's 3 left because second place gets paid. So that's when the ICM is really critical. Still, even in this spot, ICM still comes into play because the stacks are very short. Everyone except he and I, we have 14 big blinds each. And then behind us, there's a 5 big blind, an 8 big blind, and a 9 big blind. So everyone's quite short. So it's bad for us, for me to shove and get called by him. So if it had folded to me, if Thrash had folds here, Queen Jack suited, I know, and it's very obvious, is instant shove. I have to. It's a plus EV shove that hugely. So, but he raises in front of me, which makes it a very awkward and kind of weird spot. So now the question is, do I reshove all in over him? And he, in early position, which this is, he's and I have the stats right here, he's a fairly, like, not super tight, but normal, like normal opener. Like he opens between like 11 to 15% of his hands from this position, which is normal. But on these stack sizes, and especially with me this big, he should be wanting to shove a lot, just open shove. So I think we have to take that into account when constructing his opening range, because like with hands like that are mediocre but are plus EV to shove, which will put a lot of pressure on me, he should just open shove into all these shorter stacks. So if he has a hand like pocket fives, he should be wanting to shove that. I don't know if he actually will, but he should. Hands like ace 10 offsuit or ace 5 suited or something. All those hands that are like good enough to go with, but like but are not great, he's going to want to just be shoving. So it's possible that this range, when he just min opens like this, is polarized between very strong hands like aces, kings, ace, king suited, where he wants to get action, and then some more like hands that are weak, or that he wants to try to still with, but he might fold if I shove. But he might be willing to go like if this guy goes or if this guy goes, because they're so short. So so that's kind of like my read on the situation, based on what he should be doing, I think, in this spot. So now the question is, what's the calculation? So you can do spots like this too in this calculator, where there's a raise and then a re-raise all in, or you ask the question whether we should re-raise all in, and this is the result in this specific spot. So I gave this guy a range that looks like it looks like what you see on the screen here. It looks like this. Okay, so it looks like these light numbers mean I gave him like a certain percentage of those of these hands, because I think he should just be open shoving a lot of those hands, and then I weighted it more towards strong hands. I don't know if this is which I just said like he would have 100% of the time these slightly stronger hands. That's probably not true, but I don't really know how he specifically plays. So I'm just kind of like hedging my bets a little bit, rather than saying he has all of these weak suited aces and all of these weak pairs, which he should be open jamming, I think, much more often. And then like with these bigger hands that are their playability is nice, he might just be opening min more often. And also this range is slightly tight. Like he probably has some king jack off, queen jack off in there too as well sometimes. So we can fiddle with that. In fact, I can just give him some of that now. Yeah. So we'll just say like this. Okay. So he went up to 14%, but that's still reasonable. And then and now the question is, I'll have to recalc it, but the question is, what do I reshove from the cutoff? And this is yeah, that can't be right. 3-bet all in. Okay, this is more what it looks like. I don't know why it looks like this right here, because that's not correct. Oh, give me 1 second. I need to recalculate this. All right, my bad. I fixed it. I don't know, like when I changed the range there, it kind of messed things up. So now the question is, what do I reshove from the cutoff once that guy min opens? If we remember the hand, right? Like he opened under the gun. We're the two big stacks essentially tied, and then all three of the other stacks are very short. Okay, so that's the situation, and the question is, what do I reshove from here once he's opening a range? Remember, we put him on a range that looks something like this. I've changed it a little bit, but I've made it more, I think, correct and more realistic. Gave him about 14% range, but also like a lot of these hands I've only given him like 50% of the time, because I just think he's open jamming a lot of them. But also my read on that is not exactly that good, so I mixed it up a little bit. All right, anyways. And now the question is, what do I reshove? I reshove this range of hands, which is very tight, and also, so we see queen jack suited is in there. It's a slightly plus EV reshove, but there's two things to remember. That's based on my read that I think he should be open shoving a lot, but he isn't necessarily. Like he could, like, and actually I have a note on him that he plays very big volume, and my tendencies his tendencies have been to not open shove as much as I would think that he does. So I'm not really sure about that. But also, this is the very critical thing in this hand. So this is predicated on the fact that after he's opened this wide of a range, he's only and the times that I reshove, it's only profitable for me to reshove the range of hands that it just showed. That like kind of like reasonably wide range. All of these hands, some Queen 10 suiteds. All these suited Broadway hands, King Jack suited, Ace 5 suited is exactly break even. Some of these like small pairs, that's only if he calls with this tight of a range, 9s plus, after I reshove on his open. And I don't think that's realistic given how shallow we are. Even though there is some ICM, I don't think he's ever folding Ace Queen off, for example. I don't think he's ever folding 8s. So now if we or 9s. So now if we adjust this range and say that he's actually calling 9s all the time, calling 8s, probably calling 7s, we'll say he doesn't call 7s, but calling Ace Jack suited, I would think at least half the time, and then Ace Queen suited, we'll say 7. I would say like 100% of the time. Ace Queen off, I mean. So let's give him a calling range that is more realistic, and then once we do both of those, we can readjust based on now based on what he's actually calling once we reshove, and so best response, and now I can only reshove this tight, which is insanely tight. So I can only shove 10s plus, Ace Queen suited, Ace King off. If he just calls a little bit wider than he's supposed to, essentially, then all of those shoves that you saw that were shoves, they no longer are when we open up his range a little bit. And it still shows, I don't know why that still shows this 10 plus Ace Queen suited. Okay, yeah, that's because the 10s plus is wrong. I've given him 8s and 9s to call with. But maybe it does that because he's not opening all of his 8s and 9s in the first place. But anyways, yeah, so basically, it changes what we can reshove when I have this read on him that he's going to call too wide, essentially. And then this becomes not a reshove with Queen Jack suited. You can see it's negative $1, or whatever, negative 1 unit long term. So that was a very interesting hand, and I knew was close, and a lot depends on whether my read on that situation is correct and whether he's whether he will raise fold very much in that spot. If he raise folds a lot and he calls and he calls how he's supposed to, then Queen Jack suited can be a profitable reshove there. But I don't think, given how most people play in that situation, and given the fact he plays a lot of volume and is a regular, I think a lot of those hands, first of all, I think a lot of those hands he's just going to open jam himself, so he might not even have as wide of a range as I'm thinking. He might have a narrower range than that, where if that's true. And then even if he has as wide of a range as I gave him, he still has to call super narrow when I reshove to make it profitable. Okay, so now, next hand. So I didn't reshove that hand. All right. And I think it's pretty good to not have reshoved there, although, again, it's close. Okay. Another kind of interesting spot. So this is before the antes, and you have to play tighter when there are no antes. So it's that same guy, actually, Thrash, and he is a competent player who plays high volume but mostly loses, but still he kind of knows what he's doing. I don't know if he grinds for rakeback or something, but anyways, folds to him, and he has 10 big blinds and he's shoving on the button. I knew this was a very close spot. I think ace 6 off is a fold, for example, almost certainly, and also most of the other offsuit aces, and I think ace 9 off is pretty clearly a call. So this was essentially the borderline hand for me, at least in game. That's what I was thinking. I was like, I think this is a call, but I think it's pretty close against his range. So also his button opening range, although this includes once it gets shorthanded, so it's not 100% correct because some of that's on the butt heads up, but his opening percentage is 42%, which is pretty wide from the button, over 500 hands, so that's kind of a lot. So it's reasonable that he's shoving wider than a lot of people here. So that's basically what we're working with when we go in to calculate it. So let's go see. So Thrash shoves 410 on the button, and we're gonna have to try to find which hand this is. It's not that one. Okay, it's maybe this one. Nope, that's the one we just did. Maybe this one. Nope, that's a different one. What are all these hands? this is when cutoff, no, when button shoves, what happens? Middle position, cutoff, what, that's a different hand. Oh, these hands, okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, so then, okay, here it is. All right, so this is the hand. So the question is, when button shoves, so this is what it's game theoretically optimal for him to be shoving, is this range of hands, all the green hands that you see here. And like I said, he which it shows 31% of hands, so he might be shoving, like, just based on our read, that he opens 42% of buttons, although again there's some heads up there, so that's not exactly correct. Like, the 31% is probably reasonable. That's probably close to what he actually shoves. It might be slightly wider, like there might be some king 9 off, some king 4 suited, some king 3 suited, which are not technically shoves because he's slightly looser. Then it appears he's a little bit looser than some other players, so we could give him like a slightly wider range. But for now, we'll just leave it at game theory optimal and see what small blind me with my ace-8 off is supposed to call. And this is very interesting. It came out, as you can see, ace-8 off is the exact borderline hand. That's why it's white, and it's a plus 0.01 call. So basically, my intuition that it was the cutoff hand and was the closest is correct. It's exactly borderline. It's essentially a break-even call, and that's assuming that he's shoving this 31%. If we give him king 5 suited, king 4 suited, some king 9 off, some ace deuce off, which I think is reasonable to do, and also some we'll say 50% of 8-6 suited, for example, which I think is also reasonable. Then let's see what it does to my calling range. And now ace-8 off is a slight winning call. So slightly depends on what exact range of hands he actually is shoving there, whether it's a call. But based on our read, I think game theory optimal, it is exactly break even, and evidence suggests he might be slightly wider than GTO exploitatively. Which means we have to, like, if someone's shoving wider than then is game theory optimal, then you have to deviate from your own calling ranges. So if that's an exactly break-even call, sometimes you don't want to make exactly break-even calls, or even like barely winning calls, just because they're too marginal, and you can find larger edges other places. But any large winning call you want to make, so you have to take that into account when you're making your decisions. Anyways, so I ended up calling. He ended up having queens, the very top of his range, and we lost, which is fine, but that doesn't change the analysis. He was way stronger than we thought, but I don't doubt that he's shoving quite wide there. So, but if my read on that is wrong, and he actually is not shoving any king 4 suiteds or any 10-7 suiteds or any king 9 offs, then ace-8 off is a fold. So it's very dependent on the player. A lot of players who are demonstrably tighter, then that becomes a much more of an easier fold. But against a regular who knows shoving ranges, it seems like, and is on the button, I think it's a slight call against this particular player. But at worst, it's like very close. Okay, next hand. Okay, this one is interesting because what actually happens in the hand makes, so basically we're on the bubble, so this is another very ICM heavy spot. This guy, I'm in second place in chips, this guy's first. This guy is last with 457. He goes all in, here, which makes my hand a super easy, like, trivial fold. But before he went all in, I was thinking to myself, okay, what do I do if he folds? Is this a shove all in for me? And I wasn't sure, but I felt like it was close, because basically the situation is, even though I'm in second to this guy, my chip stack is large enough that if I do go all in, if this guy folds, this is all assuming that Thrash here actually folds, and now it folds to me. So assuming Thrash had folded, if I go all in here, he has to fold like a pretty wide range of hands, because this guy is so short, and we are both very likely to make the money if we don't get in a clash against each other. So when I'm the first one in, I put extreme pressure on him, because he's jeopardizing his almost certain cash, because if he calls and loses, he's going to be very short stacked. So he has to call a pretty tight range. This is what I'm thinking in game based on ICM. And then therefore this becomes close to a shove, even though it's not, it's a pretty bad hand. But because it leverages so much fold equity from him, because he has to fold so many hands, that I was curious whether it is a shove. Once he shoves, like in reality, it made it trivial in terms of what I actually did. But I tagged the hand in the game because I wanted to review it later and see whether it actually is a shove. So we're gonna check that out right now and see if it is a shove. Okay, and I had 10. Okay, so this was one of the three-handed hands. Three-handed, none of these. One of these. Three-handed. This is it. Okay, there we go. So, well, incidentally, it shows what button should be going all in with, the guy with 457. Actually, I was on the button, but this was a hand where there was no small blind because someone had just went out. So, anyway, so it says I'm small blind, but I'm actually button with there being no small blind, essentially. So this is the 457 stack. He should go all in with this range of hands. And obviously our 10-6 suited is a fold when he does. But the question is, if it had folded to us, what do we go all in with, right? So, and then this is the range of hands we are supposed to go all in with. And very, very funnily, or comically, if you look, 10-6 suited is the exact borderline hand again. So this is very shows that you're playing well when all the hands that you're tagging are coming up like almost exactly break even. And the reason I tag hands in game is because I'm not sure about the spot. Like I don't like it. If I don't tag a hand, then that means I was pretty comfortable knowing what I was doing was correct. If anything's close, then I review it, and that's how you get better, because otherwise you don't know. Like, unless you're training your intuition by running the simulations, you don't actually know what the correct answer is in a lot of spots. So, and it shows you're getting better when every hand you're tagging is coming up very borderline, essentially. And this is like literally exactly borderline whether I should shove on the button in this scenario. And I thought it was super close. Like if I probably would have folded, but. And I think it is right to fold even when it's as narrow of a winning shove as this is, and also it's a winning shove predicated on the fact that he will call with this range of hands, which is quite tight, but not unrealistic because of what we were just talking about before about the ICM considerations and leveraging a huge amount of pressure on him with our big stack. Even though he's slightly bigger, it's still like pretty much, it's close to a matter of life and death for him. So that's why he can only call with this range of hands. And that's why 10-6 suited is close to being a profitable shove, is because he still has to call like King Jack suited is exactly break even when I'm, shoving this range of hands. And so but that just because this is what he's supposed to call doesn't mean he will. But realistically, I think that this is something like what people will actually call. We can give him slightly wider and see what it does. Obviously, what it will do will make 10-6 suited not a shove. So that's why even on a borderline winning, especially when it's that small of an edge, game theory optimally, you can definitely forego it, especially if you know that he's going to call slightly wider than what is shown here, or if you suspect that he might, Yeah, and that I think might be the last hand. Let me go back to the replayer. Sorry, one sec. Okay, next hand. Did we look at this one yet? No, this is the last hand. Okay. All right, so one more hand, and then that'll be it. Okay, so. All right, now the question is, in this one, as you can see, there's 5 left, so we're not on the bubble. ICM is not a huge consideration when the stacks are distributed like this and they're very shallow. Like 3 of us are very equal. There's 2 who are short. Although Thrash is sitting out, so that is actually a critical consideration, which we'll see why in a second. Also, I know he's sitting out because I was paying attention during the game, but sometimes people aren't and they don't know that, so that affects my decision because now I don't have to worry about him calling. I mean, unless he just happens to come back, but most likely I know he's sitting out, so I don't have to worry about him calling. So then now I'm only worrying about these two, and so the question is no longer what is the correct range to shove from this position, but effectively to shove from the button because there is no button, so I'm effectively on the button. And because of that, this is a very easy shove because I actually know that when it's the button, it's a shove. But from the cutoff, it's closer. So I tagged this hand because I was like, okay, what if this guy wasn't sitting out? Would it still be a shove? Like even then, I think it's pretty, like in game, I was like, it still might be a shove, honestly. So it folds to me. And I shove 8-6 suited, obviously not a good hand, but the reason it's a shove is because you get, especially when this guy's sitting out, but even when he's not, you get 3 folds often enough, and then when you do get called, this hand, even though it looks pretty bad, it performs decently well against a lot of the hands that will call you. Not all of them, bigger pairs obviously not, but hands like ace-king offsuit, like ace-queen offsuit, king-queen suited, whatever, all of those hands that are going to call you, usually it has between like 38 and like 42% equity against those types of hands, and then also like basically it's just rarely dominated except for by the over pairs, pairs 9s and above. So even when it gets called, you have a decent percentage chance of winning a lot of the time, and also you're just not going to get called a lot. That's why it's a shove, bottom line. Ends up that everyone folds and I win, but just because that happens, that doesn't mean it was the right play, right? It's like, okay, maybe they all had bad hands. It doesn't mean I did the right thing. So the only way you can know whether you did is you go to the calculator. All right, and now in this hand, what was the distribution here? Okay, we all had about 700. One guy had 200. Okay, so now the question is, all right, so this is it right here, I think. Yeah, this is the hand. And now here's me in middle position with 727, right? That's how much I had, right? No, that's not it. Is it? No, this is the wrong hand. I gotta find the right hand. Sorry. 732. Okay, here it is. All right. Right? Yeah, this is it. Okay. Sorry. So now the question is, what do I shove from the cutoff? And this is the range of hands that I'm supposed to shove. And sure enough, look at this. 8-6 suited is literally actually this is before I've taken into account the fact. So this is assuming that the guy who has 207, the very short stack, is actually not sitting out and he's in. And with that assumption, 8-6 suited is still profitable, but just barely, literally break even. That's like it's insane actually how many hands I tagged that were plus 0.01 or minus 0.01. That's like, wow. That the queen jack suited hand, the first time I calculated it before I had to recalc it, it was the exact same thing. Like the time I recalculated it, I made slightly different assumptions, so it came out like marginally plus EV. In the GTO scenario, the first time I did it, it came out like more like almost exactly break even as well. Because I think I had him like opening fewer hands or something. But anyways, point is another like right on the line, and that's what. And I wasn't questioning the actual in-game shove because I knew it was good because I knew that one guy was sitting out, which made it good for sure. But which I can show you why that's true in 1 second. But I basically just wanted, for my own review purposes, to know if it would have been good even if he was sitting in, and it came out literally break even. That's assuming that these guys are calling, like the small blind is calling like this range of hands, which is reasonably wide, and the big blind is calling this, which is also reasonable. So like I think that the calling ranges are pretty correct, except it has this guy, the button, calling this range of hands, when in reality he's not calling any because he's not in. So if we give him 0% of hands like this, okay, so now we redo this with the button folding everything, and now I shove. It says I shove 85% of hands. I actually don't think that's correct. This thing has like trouble like readjusting sometimes for some reason. I know that I am supposed to shove like quite wide in this scenario. When I know this guy's sitting out, but I don't think it's 85%. I think it's less, but because this thing goes haywire sometimes if you do certain things with it. Like if I recalculated it from the beginning and told it that that guy wasn't there, I think it would tell me I have to go very wide here, but I don't think quite this wide. I could be wrong. That might be the right answer, 85%, but I feel like it's maybe messing up, which it does sometimes if you recalc something from the beginning. Anyways, I think that was the last hand. This video ended up being longer than I thought that it would be, but it showcases a lot of very interesting concepts for ICM and how to use a game theory optimal framework for how you're thinking about especially these short stack shoving spots, but also like incorporating your reads from population tendencies, which means like what people are mostly doing most of the time, and also specific reads, like we talked about it in multiple hands, but like me just knowing that this guy is a regular and opens a lot on the button or whatever, you have to incorporate those facts into how you're actually adjusting from the game theory optimal position, which is basically it's the right answer if you're playing like a robot, and it calculates what the right answer is for everyone, but not everyone is playing like that, so then you have to adjust according, because you can exploit their tendencies to either fold too much or to go all in too much, and then you deviate from the game theory optimal line, which but then you need to deviate to exploit their mistakes. And I just thought it was pretty telling and also interesting. If you're into poker at all, especially hyper turbos where you have a lot of these very short stack, very ICM heavy situations, and then you have those in the single table tournaments a lot, but also the same concepts apply at final tables a lot of the time, which are also very ICM heavy. Those are the two scenarios where ICM is the most critical, and also bubbles of tournaments, I guess, multi-table tournaments. The little single table hyper turbos are very good for training you to think through these spots, and using tools like this can help you understand the differences in shoving ranges and calling ranges from what you would do in a cash game and what you should do given the payout structure of a tournament. So hope you liked the video. Like and subscribe. We'll talk to you all later, and I'm going to get out of here. Peace.